Welcome to Chaos Divided, your weekly dose of wholesome hammer. If you're a fan of what we're doing, and we hope you'll subscribe and follow us along, and if you'd like to support the show directly, you can find us on patreon.com/Chaos Divided 40K. Get in the Discord, chat with us, get access to cool narrative missions. There's lots to enjoy. This week, Ulfgar and I are chatting about mental health and well-being in Warhammer. And for this week's quote, I picked a loyalist quote. You'll have to forgive me. But I felt like it fit. And it's, as the Emperor protects, so must we.
I think so too. I
feel like it fits. I feel like, we must also protect each other. We must protect ourselves. We must, look after one another. It is a community after all.
I feel like that's a particularly positive one too. And I'll be honest, I looked through a host of different quotes trying to find a really good positive quote, and there really aren't, past like full paragraph speeches. There isn't like a couple of positive quotes. There is, I mean, in a setting where in the grim dark future, there's only war, like I'm sure there's a silver lining there somewhere, but you have to look pretty hard.
I mean, the whole point is there is no silver lining. And I think that's part of. We've kind of talked about this on the show, the podcast before. But I think part of the appeal of Warhammer is that escapist element of it's so bad that no matter how bad your life feels in the moment, Warhammer is always something you can be like, well, at least I'm not living through this thing.
Absolutely. I mean, that is what initially drew me to the whole thing to begin with. Was I was just a little kid and my life wasn't that great, so I was like, hey, here's this game, and the more I learned about it, the more I was like, this is way better than life, so I'm gonna do this, and I'm just gonna think about it a lot.
You're like, I'm not eating people, so I'll do one step up.
In terms of, I can think of a little bit of positivity in the setting though, and that is in the form of Euphrates Keela. I think she is one of the most
Oh, but that's not how she is.
Yeah. So,
but that's a dark story.
Yeah, but, and I'm thinking specifically of her interactions with Gara, and she is that light and that positivity and that hope for Gara, and I love that. Yeah, I know how it all ends because it's grimdark, so it's always going to go that way.
Yeah, it's just like that. She goes through it. She goes through it the whole way. But no, you're right. She does definitely spread a lot of hope on her journey. Yeah,
absolutely. She is probably one of the most positive characters I can think of. Yeah.
The irony being that she uses Lorgar's words to spread that positivity is also interesting. It's a bit of I think that is actually somewhat ironic.
Yeah, I guess you could say that he would be the absolute full negative, so much so that she turned it back around to positive. She just turned the wheel the way and just brought it full circle. So
yeah, I mean, her vision of the whole the Emperor's godhood is very much more written in hope and belief and faith and strength, whereas Lorgar's was more of a constituent religion that was more about precepts and rules and things you had to do, not necessarily beliefs that would support you. So yeah, that is kind of a cool dichotomy that I have never thought about until this exact moment, and is absolutely not what we're talking about today, but would be a cool episode to do later. But yeah, we've talked about mental health a few times before, and I feel like it comes up the odd episode. But I really think, it's something we can't talk too little about, because I think it's a huge reason why, people get into the hobby, people stay in the hobby. Sometimes it's a reason why people get out of the hobby. And, I think there's a lot to talk about within Warhammer as to why we all do this and what this all means to us. Because, I mean, at its basic level, we're painting and pushing around little toy soldiers, but obviously, anyone who's played Warhammer for any amount of time, it means more to you than you don't just go play with army men in the same way. There's clearly another layer there that makes the brain go burr.
This is something I think about very often, actually, when I see maybe some other folks who are not as engrossed in the hobby as I am myself, because this is life for me. This, like, I wake up every day and one of the first thoughts past, am I okay? Is my family okay? Is usually like, oh, RB list, or ooh, this model, or ooh, this paint, or ooh, this. And when they're like, oh, I've been out of the fold, I'm like, I don't know what that life is like, because this scratches so many itches for me. I could never conceive of it not being here, and it's something that I've also been noticing more and more, is that it attracts a certain level of neurodivergence, and like a spectrum within a spectrum, right? A whole host of different folks that all come together and all share in this hobby for different reasons. Some of us might be obsessive compulsive and really, really love how neatly the models fit together, and how they when you get a transfer just right, it feels so good, that is what is there for you. Some of us love statistics and problem solving and probability, and being able to go, okay, I have 45 attacks that hit on threes, and they're going into something that's toughness this, and I have a friend that can do that in his head, and I'm like, that just boggles my mind. But I love that you can do that. I love that for you. I can see and feel that energy, like what that is doing for them, and I'm seeing it more and more across the table from me, and I love it. And it's helping me interact with these people better, and it's making me want to interact with them more. Not even just playing the game, but hobbying. The whole, like we say, we've turned this into a verb, hobbying. Like this thing that we do, and it means so many different things. And if you know, you know. If you don't, you're like, what are you talking about? What does that mean? Because you could be building, it could be converting, it could be painting, it could be sculpting, could be making a diorama, it could be making a display board, it could be making just terrain to play on. It could be painting any of or all of that. There is so many different facets to this, and it thrills me to walk around and see the joy on people's faces when they're engaging in that thing that makes their mind turn. Because that's like you say, it's escapism. Most people can't get this in their regular life. I wish we all could, right? I wish we could all have a job that was as fulfilling as like hobbying is, but we can't. So, but getting to engage in that thing, that I just love seeing it. It's so great. And like I said, it's different for everybody, and it's such a broad spectrum.
For sure. I just wanted to make a little joke here, because my wife absolutely hates that we call it the hobby. She's like, it's a hobby. It's not like the hobby. It is not the only hobby that exists. And I was just like, when you're in it, it's not what it feels like. It feels like it is the hobby. Because why would you get into anything else?
It's true. And I know we primarily talk about Warhammer, but it does encompass more than that. It has grown beyond just that. I know maybe it was that once upon a time, but it's grown beyond that. The hobby is so large. It could simply sitting there and world crafting. You could be sitting there and crafting to missions for your friends, or I remember back in the old days when we had the big hex tile campaign maps, that you would play like a narrative campaign across, and there was all the different stuff that you would tile. Like there is something for everyone. There really, really is.
I have also noticed, I think other game systems have kind of figured out that the hobby component of it is an increasingly important element, because Wizards has gotten more and more into producing, regardless of your feelings on the minis themselves, they are producing minis, and I'm noticing more and more they're doing unpainted minis. So I think there's a growing appetite, amongst D&D players to break into that hobbying side of it. I have friends who just like make characters on Hero Forge just so they can just like imagine what it looks like. And then I go to them and be like, hey, I know some like 3D printers. We can print them off. And they're just, oh, I don't know. That's a big, scary step. I don't know if I want to make this real. And I'm like, oh, but once you do, you'll
As soon as you
get your
dip a toe in.
I know it'll happen.
Yeah, it'll...
Actually, for one of them, I painted him a mini for his birthday. So he has his first mini. And I don't know if he liked it or not, but I feel like it's the beginning. It's just that little taste of like, it's your own customized mini.
You're planting a seed. You're like, you just, here, I'm going to put this here. You look at it every once in a while, go, that's really cool. And, one day,
Right?
the question will come, and, like we all do with our friends and family and so forth. Oh, come on in. Let me tell you a story. Let me show you one page.
Right? Be like, are you ready to spend some money? Yeah. I mean, honestly, at this point, I feel like I've become a collector of paints as much of a collector of Warhammer. So.
Absolutely. I mean, that's half the time. That's how I get new paint, is by going into the store and just be like, oh, I like this color. Oh, I like this color. Most of the time, I'm never looking for something. I'm just like, oh, I like this. This is a nice color. I'm going to find something to do with this. Or maybe
the exact moment I knew I'd gone too far, I walked into a game store that doesn't sell a lot of Warhammer. But yeah, they had a bunch of older paints, and I was like, "Ooh!" And I like bought a bunch of these like discounted paints because I was just like, "Oh, I can't get these anymore." Which I will then be sad if they dry out or I run out of them. But I was like, I've become like a paint goblin, of like I must have all the paints, but only the pretty paints. I'm like, I have like my greens are all like pretty greens, my blues are all pretty blues. I don't actually have a lot of reds and oranges because I find a lot of miniature paints, once you get into like red, brown, and grays, get really gross really fast. Like that's actually one of the things. Like, shout out to Citadel. I think they actually do a better job of doing like like, not that they have a great range, but they have the best range out there for like pastels and like just nicer colors that are not like either very grim looking or very like, I don't know, blood, death, ash, gore.
Yes, and their paint has definitely gotten better over time. But don't get me wrong, there are definitely a few things that I would love to have from back in the day, like old Goblin Green or Chestnut ink. I would love a pot of chestnut. I would not love to open a pot of chestnut ink because those screw tops were like, I had to put them in the jaws of life to get them open. But they were amazing. Those things were spectacular. Their new paint.
I miss the old paint tops.
Yes.
The like hex ones.
Yes.
They were better. They sealed better. They made less of a mess. I almost, this is maybe a conspiracy theory. I feel like the new ones, I have a bunch on my desk and I'm holding one right now, are almost designed to not quite seal.
So you have to keep them clean. You have to go in every once in a while, and it sucks. But you have to pull the whole thing off because it's just silicone. So you just pull the whole thing off and you go in there with like your hobby pliers or whatever. You dig out all that paint and then it'll seal again.
Ugh.
Because what's happening is when you're opening it, that little lip that catches paint that we think is... it
overlaps.
It leaks backwards into the ring around cap and therefore doesn't seal over time.
Yeah, the old ones didn't do that. They had, and there was usually more of a satisfying like snap when they closed. It was like
I invite you to try Pro Acryl Monument. They're very, very good paints.
Yeah, I feel like I very much buy paints the way you said. I just walk in and pick pretty paints. And then like I don't go like, oh, I have a plan for this project, I need these paints. I go like, oh, pretty paints, I'll figure out a way to do something with them at some point. And whenever I look at any of the other ones, I don't know if it's just like a lot of the game stores and like hobby shops around carry like the ugliest versions of everything, because like I want to see it, I want to look at it and be like, ooh, that's pretty, I can imagine what I want to do with this. And when you're just like olive green drab, olive green drab, muddy red. You're just like, well, I don't care.
Picking colors is stimulating in its own right. You know, getting to,
Well, that's why I said, like, I am a collector of paints, and I've accepted this.
it is mentally stimulating to, to go and look at the wall of colors and figure out where I fit in that color wall for that day.
I never even worry about fitting into the color wall. No, I mean, I've gotten so deep now that, like, I use washes as, like, shaders to, like, then see what the other colors underneath are gonna pull through, and I'm just like, I'm lost in Colorland now. And I have no regrets. And honestly, I think, like, going back to kind of the mental health side of it, like, getting into the, like, art of it and actually being able to see the art of what I was doing. And, you know, I've talked a lot about, like, that first Rhino that kind of, like, everything clicked together and I had fun painting.
Mm-hmm.
And I really encourage, like, the way I got there is different than how anyone else is probably ever going to get there. But finding what your style is that, like, makes it feel good for you, I think is kind of like a core part of learning how to hobby. Because trying to, like, replicate what someone else is doing is going to eventually lead you to, like, frustration. You can try and, like, figure out how you can do what someone else has done, but trying to just copy what other people have done, I feel like, and this is maybe just me, is kind of a way to disappointment. Because, like, I have never been able to look at what someone else has done and been like, I can do that. And because it always just looks worse or different or not exactly the same, or just, like, doesn't get you, like, to that point of satisfaction.
Firstly, you need to learn your process. Secondly, you need to work that process. And thirdly, you need to trust that process. Also, art is like, art is about creation, not recreation. You're not looking to copy someone else. You are looking to use maybe some of their techniques, some of their styles, and some of their brushstrokes, but make that your own. Like, it's like acting. You wouldn't look to, like, I don't want to be Bruce Willis, you know, but I would love to maybe emulate some of his quirks and style, but ultimately that will be me. I'm never going to be Bruce Willis. It's not, you know, it's this thing. Art is art. You could learn from and try and imitate, but you're never going to be. So being,
and I think it's the inspired by, not copy of. Yes, like the critical
and
difference.
Learning how to do that is important, and is also it's the thrill. That's part of the thrill of the journey, right? Is to learn where you fit in, like where you fit in the color wheel. You know, where are you? What part of that do you occupy? How do you like to go about your thing? Is slap chop your thing? Great. Are you, because there are people that have won, like, painting competitions with slap chop, like just really, really great slap chop, and I see people put that down, and that's not cool. They're all tools. They're there. Like, you wouldn't walk by someone building a house and go, what are you using, a hammer? Noob. Like, what? You know, it's a tool. You wouldn't put someone down for using a tool that's available to them. That's silly. You should use everything that's available to you to its fullest extent. You know, like it. But there's nothing wrong with challenging yourself and saying, like, hey, don't use this or do that, because those allow you to have fun and expand your repertoire and your consciousness in different ways. You know, and it is freeing. It is mentally freeing to just be able to sit here and throw colors on something and have something gorgeous when you're done.
I think too, you know, I've had a lot of people on the show, and I often think about like Lawrence Baharath talked about, like, his therapy orcs. It was just like when he needed to kind of, like, get the juices going, having that project. And I think, you know, going back to your point about slap chop, like, I think intent is important. If you're trying to win a golden demon and you want to spend 300 hours glazing and blending and, you know, building a giant diorama around something, that's very different than, you know, what slap chop is usually used for, which is, you know, a pretty consistent way to build and paint, like, very kind of clean looking minis for the tabletop. And I think having that idea of what you're trying to accomplish, because what I'm trying to get around to is kind of the, like, when we talk about mental health in the hobby, because I feel like there can also be a negative element to hobbying on your mental health if you let it, like, run you. Like the imposter syndrome is one, I think we all are aware of, and kind of that like weight of like what happens when it doesn't turn out the way you want to, or you're trying to get an outcome, not necessarily enjoying the
So yeah,
process.
that's important to talk about too, for sure. Burnout is a big thing, and then absolutely learning from failure. Failure is a thing. Mistakes are a thing. You always hear people say, "I'm intimidated by this, but I don't. I'm afraid of painting this because I don't want to mess it up." And the reality is, you're gonna mess
Mm,
up, and it's okay. And you should forgive yourself, and you should move on because it's easy to fix and you can always repaint it. And like, you need to learn from it. That is the big takeaway. What can I learn from this? Oh, okay, I should thin my paints. Okay, if I mix this and this will turn out better. Oh, okay, if I do this in this order instead of that order, it turns out differently and it turns out more to my liking. You know, those are the things that
mm.
like those are the things that artists who have been painting, or hobbyists who have been doing this for a long time just know. Like, if I do this, then I get X plus Y equals Z. And those are like hurdles you kind of have to climb over. If you're new to the hobby, you have to climb over them yourself. There's no amount of conversing that will teach you those things. And like, learning from those failures is important. Making yourself hobby when you really don't want to is something that you should learn not to do too. Place the boundary if you need to. Be
Mm.
kind to yourself. Don't force yourself to do it because you have a tournament coming up. You know what? Maybe you shouldn't take part in that tournament. Maybe you should give yourself a break. That's okay. It's okay to not constantly drive yourself too. If the competition aspect is something that you enjoy, even competitors take time off, and that's important. I know staying on top of the
Absolutely.
meta is important and staying on top of your game is important, but so is the rest of your life and taking care of yourself. Because if you are so engrossed in the hobby that you can't take a day off from hobbying, I'm sure there's other things in your life that are going to be suffering as well.
Absolutely. And I think, talking about the getting ready for an event, um, one thing that I think helped me get more into hobbying was actually being comfortable with an incomplete mini. Like
Mhm.
if you're getting something ready for a tournament and you get it to a point where you're like, hey, it's battle ready. It's maybe not done. It's not what I want it to eventually end up looking like, but I don't know how to get where I want to go with it, or I don't have the time, or I just like am not there for it. I think it's okay to walk away from a mini and say, you know what, I'm gonna figure this out later because I just like can't visualize how to get to the next step. And I want to play with a mini. It's the new thing. It's the new hotness. Like, well, for whatever reason, and the new hotness can just mean like it's new to you and you want to see what it does. Um, I think it's okay to let yourself like go, okay, you know what? I just want to make sure that it's okay for the tabletop. It doesn't have to be like a permanent member of my collection at this
There
exact
is
moment.
nothing wrong with having a miniature that is like a okay for now paint job. Like, this is for now. I think we
Yeah.
place a lot of pressure on ourselves out of fear of judgment from others, because I think we're going to walk in and put that down
Mm.
and someone's going to go, "You half-assed this." And we know that that's
Have
not
you
the
ever
case,
actually seen that happen?
but
Because I haven't. In like,
that's that's terrible. That's terrible. I'm
no, I
fortunate.
said I
I've
haven't
never.
seen it happen. Like,
Oh,
I
you
can't,
haven't?
I can't, I
Okay.
can't
Oh, well,
imagine it
never
happening.
mind. That's good. That's good. I've never seen that happen. I can't imagine a world where that would be the case. But I think it still is. Like, we are still. I can't tell you how many times somebody's walked in and going, "I'm sorry, my stuff isn't painted." I went, "That's okay. I don't care." That are you like.
I was in an event on Saturday, and he was like, "Oh, I know, I don't get the battle ready," and I was like, "Man, your army is like, the stuff that's painted is painted extremely well. Yeah, there's some stuff here that's been airbrushed, and there's two or three colors on it. I can tell you're not done, but I was like, I'm not gonna let the fate of this game be decided on whether or not you have enough paints on your models. Like, we're playing a clean
Yep.
game. Like, I'm not walking out of this with an advantage because." you didn't stay up until 4 in the morning to paint your minis. Like, that's like, and but there was very much the like he, I think he came to it with a degree of like, you know, I
Right,
know what I did, and I'm like, you didn't do anything wrong though. Like, it's an RTT. We're not an Adepticon, and you're going in for a
right,
golden
right,
demon with your, you know.
is a real fear I have run into a lot with people, and we need to be kinder to ourselves. They're like, it's okay. We show up with stuff that's primed in various
Yeah,
states of painting. That's okay. I am never going to judge someone for showing up with something unfinished or whatever. Putting you that's effort. Having the army with any state of paint on it is effort. And I love when people are like, look at this, I just painted this, and they
yeah.
valiantly show up, Space Marine number 32, and are just like jazzed about it. I did lenses in this one. And I'm like, let me see. That's great. Like, I love that, and conversely, I try to like I try to dissuade that self-judgment of like showing up with stuff. I want us to get away from that. Like, I mean, if you're going to a tournament,
Mm.
yeah, you get 10 points for having your stuff being battle ready. Is it battle ready? Okay, cool. You know what that is. I know what that is. Great. But otherwise, if we're not,
But battle ready is like, it is not it is not the same standard as you might normally apply to your, like, you know, curated top of the line like showpiece model. Like, you know, I'm sure your Mortarion is a work of art. It is a centerpiece model that I'm sure you put a lot of time and effort and love into. And that is not what battle ready means. Like, battle ready is like, it's not gray plastic on the table.
right, and that's always very obvious. When you look at someone's models, and like you see that they're centerpiece models, and that it was clearly intended to be, and it's gorgeous. It's them. And like, as I've said before, I love seeing art through somebody else's eyes. I love seeing how they see the world. That is a genuine connection to me, and that is healthy. That's healthy for all of us. In I think we've reached a state where we're starting to slowly disconnect with each other because we don't have to be in the same room as much. Right? Even Tabletop Simulator has made Warhammer so that we can play virtually. We don't have to be in the same room. You can flip the table as much as you want. No models get hurt. But when you are in the same room, that is allowing us to still connect. Right?
Absolutely. And
And
it doesn't matter how good a photo you take of a mini, it always looks better in person.
absolutely, 100%. Every time looks better in real life. Absolutely. Because there's always things that you're going to see that the camera is never going to pick up. And I love being a finder in those moments. I love looking at people's models and going, "Oh, like, I love the pimples you did under here," and of course I'm always going to take it to Nerdle. But or I love this over here, this slimy bit. Or I love finding the little things that people put in their models. That to me is like a signature. Like, if you ever look at any piece of art, the artist signs it somewhere in the painting. That's my favorite part. It's like, where's Waldo of their signature? I love finding it. Because that is the thing that makes it theirs.
Yeah, and I think just the, like, you know, like the imposter syndrome part of it. Like, I think a lot of what we're talking here is like, it's pressure we put on ourselves. Like I said, like, I've never been to an event where somebody's like, "Oh, what a mega paint job you've brought to the table." Like, it's that, but yet I walk out, like, especially when I first came back to the hobby, and I had some like slap chop would have been 5 steps up from what I did. I put, they scraped battle ready, and I would come to the table and be like, I'm sorry for how bad my models look, and no one ever put that on me. I put that on me. Like, that was
Yeah.
my guilt and shame that I hadn't done better, and I brought that energy with me. And I think that's
Hmm.
something like we need to be able to look in our own hearts and be like, you know what? I am enough.
Yeah, absolutely. We should be kinder to ourselves. Um,
Yeah.
Conversely, though, we also shouldn't take the negativity. If we can't be understanding and respectful, you shouldn't put up with negativity. Blatant negativity is something that we need to be more readily willing to walk away from. Like, that has no place at our tables, and we should stop allowing it. You know, people that are there to just roll face and not give a crap about the other person and are totally not interested in having fun, they can play with each other. That's fine. You know, it's like,
I thought those are called Thousand Suns players. That's mean, but not inaccurate. Sorry, Thousand Sun stands. Your rules are uninteractable.
Like, I've encountered it one time since I came back to the hobby. So really once in my adult, like, Warhammer career. And I just walked away from the table. Like, the guy was measuring all of his measurements, like, 2 feet off the table. His army was, I wouldn't even say the bare minimum of battle ready. Like, none of his assault marines had jump packs, but they were supposed to have jump packs. Right? That's not WYSIWYG, right? That's not WYSIWYG at all. So that rubbed me the way, but...
And, like, I also don't like when people are, like, WYSIWYG, like, extremists either. Like, you know, I look at, like Tau, for example. Tau have had their, like, battlesuits rules change so much in the last 4 editions that if it's like, hey, man, I've got, like, a plasma rifle and a flamer on there, but they're the flamer ones right now, I'm gonna be like, that's cool, as long as I can tell that that's what that is. But yeah, if you're like, hey, these jump pack marines over here are actually, like, outriders, and I'm like, I can't, if you're forcing me to remember what stuff is, like
I would argue that that's not WYSIWYG, and therefore you don't get 10 points. You know, like, you should start out 10 points below, because that's not WYSIWYG. You didn't even put all the parts on the model. You didn't finish building it. How can but besides that, that's being, like...
I guess my point is, like, WYSIWYG can go too far where it's like, hey, they have, like, bolt pistols and swords, but this one here actually has, like, the power fist because the rules changed between 9th and 10th, and now I have the war gear. I guess my point is that, like, I'm not going to deduct 10 points from someone if, like, a model is slightly wrong, or, like... But yeah, that you don't put jump packs on the jump pack marines. It's like, okay, well, how am I supposed to know what they are?
So, like, nobody gave me any problems because, like, in 9th edition, and even now, every Plague Marine champion in a Plague Marine squad can have a plasma gun, and now they're heavy plague weapons, but a power fist. Not every model has a plasma gun. It's just generally accepted that they all have plasma guns, and that's the way that I play them. They're all the same. Nobody's different. Nobody's carrying anything different. They're all the same. And nobody's ever had a problem with that. But the person was also argumentative with me, and it was the 3rd game in the day at a tournament. I was like, you know what? You win. I don't even care. You score it up here. I'm going to open BCP where I'm going to enter our scores for us. Let's count it up. You win. Congrats. Shook his hand. Said, good game. I'm going home. Now you get to stay here. I'm going home. I get to go to Dunkin' Donuts and get myself a freaking coffee, and I'm going to enjoy. I'm going to blast music on the way home, and this is going to be a distant memory. Like, I do not have to take this. I don't care. Like,
no, and I think that takes a lot of, like, it takes a certain amount of, like, boundary setting and a maturity within the community and hobby to feel comfortable doing that. Because, like, that when you're newer and you don't know who everyone is, like, you don't know if that person is, like, the tournament organizer's best friend, and, you know, you're gonna have a hard time next time you come to the tournament. And it's harder when you're new because you don't know the dynamics of the organization. That's, you know, every event has its regulars, every store has its regulars, and if you kind of walk in and you're like, oh, I'm just gonna, like, be done with this, and then all of a sudden you're kind of the weird one because you didn't follow the norms, and that is not to say that their norms are good. Places can have toxic norms. My point is just, like, it's hard to be the person that says, hey, you know what, you're no fun to play against.
Yeah, and I was also the new person coming into a tournament with a bunch of people who were all sort of that established clique who all played with each other, and, like, because it's different, it's like the next state over from me. So I'm kind of like the visitor. They're all the home players. But I did make sure the following day that I went to the TO and I told them about it. And I was like, listen, I'm new. This is my first tournament ever in my life. You know, when I was a kid, we never did things because like the internet didn't exist. So
There was no BCP in 2005. Yeah,
like how about like 1990?
you're a little older than I am.
But this is my first tournament ever. I don't want to just be like the problem guy, so I don't know how to handle it. I went them and
Yeah.
this caused me a lot of anxiety. I have social anxiety to begin with. Putting myself into this tournament scene was like forcing myself to kind of like stretch that a little bit, right? In to begin with. But I made sure I went and I told them like, hey, I don't know how to handle this. This is my first tournament. This was what was happening, X, Y, and Z. He was kind of an issue the whole time. Like, I had to call you guys over because he challenged one of my rules that I know very well. This is my only army that I play. Like, ask anybody here, I'm the Death Guard guy. But how should I have handled this? And they said, you should have told us about it. Like, we want to know. This is the only way that we can avoid situations like this happening in the future is if we know about it. So fortunately, they were very cool and they were very understanding. I could totally see like if this was like maybe one of their boys, like they might not have been so receptive, but that wasn't the case. They were fair. They were fair and they were impartial, and that's all I wanted. And I'm like, I don't want the person to be penalized or punished. I just was like, hey, I just want you to know that these are the sort of things that were happening. So like maybe you can hover around the table for his other games and kind of see if that happens again. I don't want him to be called out. I want to avoid feels bads, but it wasn't a good time for me. And I can chalk it up to like whatever. Like I said, this was my first tournament. My goal was like winning a game, one single game. I knew I wasn't gonna top 3. I was willing to win one game, and I did that. So I was already happy. I could not care what happened after that. But I also wanted to kind of help other people not run into that same situation. Like if this was going to be destructive, I wanted to stop it as soon as possible so that it didn't go any further, to help other people avoid that same feels bad situation and not be me. So we need to look out for each other too.
Sure. No, I mean that's a great. That's why I said that. Like that's a great outcome, and like being able to do that, I think, is important and helpful. And I think that as a community, we need to be more on the lookout for opportunities to nip those things in the bud. And like, good on you for doing that. I guess the only thing I wanted to say is like, if you don't feel like you can be the person that can like wear that, I also don't think you should beat yourself up over it. Like you said, like if you are anxious about it or you don't know how it works, and you don't want to like be the pariah the next day because you don't know and you're not comfortable, maybe talk to another player you do know that might be able to like give you a little more guidance. Like if you're not comfortable just reaching out to the TO and being like, hey, this was a rough game and here's ABC, still try and like raise your hand in a way that's comfortable for you.
That's absolutely fair. And even as a person that maybe goes to more events like that, don't make yourself available. If you see someone who kind of looks a little lost, like, hey, are you okay? Is everything cool? Like, because I've been that person and I have been looking for that lifeline for somebody to throw me a rope and be like, hey, what do you need? Like, I need a cart for my army. Oh, okay, they're in there. Huh. Now that is like one more thing off my plate and I can feel better about. Okay, make it.
You've been to events that have their own carts? What? This is a thing?
We did it at like an American Legion, and they just had like the cafeteria carts and they were made available for us. Since then, I went like Amazon Prime Day and I bought that. That was like, purchase number 1. If I'm ever going to an event again, I got a little grandma cart to roll my army in on. So.
I mean, that's become a super common thing here, but I've never been to an event where it's like, oh, here's your provided cart. It's like people bring their own.
Well, I mean, it was like, we asked nicely, we cleaned them off at the end. Fair. Like we made sure that we respected their property. It wasn't like, okay, here's your cart.
I mean, I didn't expect it to have valet service. I just like, no, I mean, I'm the shows up with my models shoved into a cardboard box, like all on top of each other, and I have to sort them all out because I am Jank Hammer.
Do you want to know the only person who showed up at the event with their models in a cardboard box was the Games Workshop employee, and they were custodians. And it was really funny because they all fit in a shoebox.
This is what I literally I have like a little like beverage box that I just bring everything in. I figured it out. I know how to like what angle my Land Raider has to stand straight up in, and like to get them all to fit. And then like at the end of the day, I usually just scoop them up and throw them in the box, and they're all chaos, and I have to unwind them all the next time I pull them out. So it's hell, but that's what I do's. And that's why I use very strong plastic glue when I make my models, because I would rather them look a little chunky.
Well, that's weathering
and not break, because I am rough on them.
That's just weathering. They've
right. They're Emperor's children. They're supposed to look a little like beat up and messed up.
They're veterans of the Long War. They've been fighting for 10,000 years inside that box.
Right. They're actually they're also all masochists. So they're like. Pain is pleasure, baby. Their suffering gives me strength. Actually, we talked about this with Tanya of like the LARPing your faction, and the more I play Emperor's Children, the more I feel like I just go to the table and just like emote at people and just go like, I'm gonna play Emperor's Children, and just stupidly charge at you and lose the game. And I feel like I'm like about to hit post Ispan. Like Emperor's Children, I'm fully on like the downfall of just like succumbing to chaos, and everyone around me has not succumbed to chaos, and they're looking at me weird, and I'm just like, I don't care anymore.
Yeah,
bring on the pain, bring on the suffering.
LARPing your faction is fun when you're one of the other gods, until the Nurgle player shows up with the sniffles, and then it's a party foul, and everybody has to go home.
Yeah, Nurgle gets a little. You know what? I feel like, but actually, you know what? I feel like Kaylee LARPs at Nurgle well, of the caring, like Nurgle's garden, like grandfather's blessings of like, oh my children, my beautiful children. Like you don't have to. Like, there's the meme that goes around of like. You love Slaanesh because you're into like hard rock and drug and like sex, and like I love Nurgle because I crap my pants. We're not the same. Like I feel like there's a different way to go with Nurgle. You don't have to be craps your pants, Nurgle. You could be like, loving grandfather's blessings, Nurgle, of like the doting grandparent. Nurgle's the only Chaos God that like truly loves his followers. Like, Khorne sometimes likes his followers. Tzeentch never likes his followers. And Slaanesh has favorites that entertain Slaanesh. But Nurgle genuinely, likes their followers. Like, Nurgle is love.
That is sort of unfair that they default to the just dirty, nasty, ugly part of Nurgle. Why can't it be about, like, love and regrowth and life and rebirth and all of those things? Just because he goes about it in a way that you don't necessarily like doesn't change that that's what he's about.
I do love the idea that the Space Wolves are Tzeentch's favorite legion.
Yeah, absolutely. Tzeentch, I don't think Tzeentch likes any of them because he knows what they're all going to do, and so he just knows what kind of people they all are.
Because, like, they also follow the word of fate, or the weird of fate, and...
That's yep.
Right. There are 2 legions that have people that turn into other things. Yeah. Just saying.
Well, I mean, also a dog obeys every time, right? You teach them to do something and they do it every time because they know what to do. So.
Yes. Was that not also the Tzeentchiest thing?
I mean, isn't that then just sort of like Tzeentch fighting himself to have Space Wolves mess up the thousands?
Like the Battle of Frostbro was just Tzeentch fighting himself.
Wow, it really does just work in circles, huh?
Right.
He's just the Mr. Burns, like the meme. Excellent.
Like when the Battle of Frostbro just leads to him enslaving Magnus. It all works out in Tzeentch's favor.
Yeah, it's like, I win. Doesn't matter what happens, I win. I'm good.
Plans within plans. So yeah. So no, the LARPing at the table I feel like is a thing. I feel like I'm trying to embody it more and more. Like I was playing a Tau game recently and I like turned into the patient hunter and I was just like, what's happening to me? What is this caution? What is this restraint? And I was like, I am one with the Tau Va right now.
I do love that. I love when you show up to a game and you put your army down and you feel like you're really vibing with them and they, like it's just clicking for you. That is like it just feels good, when you get to have that. Conversely, I've definitely been on the opposite end where I'm like, I feel like I'm, wearing gloves on my feet, trying to drive a car, like, and stick shift, like. But it's really great when it all works and you're like, yes, okay, I know what this is supposed to do. I know what this is supposed to do. I know where all the pieces fit. I know how to solve all these problems. It feels like I'm doing and it feels thematic to me. And there's no better feeling than that. And especially if it's like painted to your liking and you're playing on a battlefield that has like a nice mat and all painted terrain. That's living.
No, that's honestly, like, I will say this. I do like the 10th is getting a fluffier slant to it. Like, the indexes were not great. But each codex that comes out seems to have, like, some degree of, like, fluffy consideration to it. Because honestly, like, 9th had its issues, but, like, I could just play my go fast, like, screw around Emperor's Children list, and I love that to death. And I can't do that anymore, which is, like, what is, like, a source of eternal sadness for me. But as I see other codexes come out, like, talking about, like, playing Tau, like, there's a very fluffy rules in there that allow you to play the same models very differently. And, like, the Sisters Codex, you can do a lot of very different things with a lot of, like, the exact same models, and they just play differently. And it seems to be more based in, like, lore and fluff than it does, like, are these the hardest, bestest rules that are gonna blow up the meta? Like, it really does feel more like I think of, like, the Iron Warriors detachment in CSM. Like, that is very fluffy. It's very much just like, I am gonna slowly move towards you, and you're gonna shoot the hell out of me, and I'm not gonna care, and then I'm just gonna blow you off the face of the earth. In my, like, sieging, and that's what it looks like and feels like, and they did a good job of that. And, like, are the rules the best?
Right? There's that.
Probably not, but they feel good.
So where I think the problem lies is with Space Marines, right? Because there's so much that they almost can't have enough detachments for them to function as diversely as they are. It works with all of the others because they have a much smaller range, and so it's more easier to fit them into the little slots, right? The one that they almost fall apart with, Chaos, because Chaos is really a lot more diverse than they can fit into that codex.
Well, yeah.
Even with all the Traitor Legions and Renegades, but they still did a good job.
Yes.
But they also don't have like 100 data sheets like the Space Marines have, or whatever ridiculous number it is. So it's.
Oh yeah, like White Scars just don't exist right now. I get what, yeah.
Right. There's too much stuff for them to, like. They came up with a couple of little boxes and they were like, okay, we'll kind of figure out the rest later. And so then you have like one way to play with Space Marines, more or less. Right? Is like Gladius, more or less. And then, the Dark Angels have like their thing, or they play Gladius. Black Templar have their thing.
Well, and that's, yeah, and I've been seeing more and more. It's like, Blood Angels are the only ones I actually see play their unique detachment. And you see the Salamanders one sometimes.
But that's theirs. That's like, they're obviously their thing, right?
Yeah. Well, there is a clearly White Scar one. It just doesn't work the way it should work. Yeah, and like I know there is technically a Raven Guard detachment in Space Marines, but I also don't think that one works very well. So no, I get what you mean about, and even like there's 8 detachments in the CSM Codex, and I feel like they also left things behind and pulled out Emperor's Children in the same Codex, so there's definitely room for more. But in some of the like less fleshed out codexes. I do think they've done a good job.
It's just that the Space Wolves do the White Scars detachment better.
Yeah, but I guess I'm saying, like, I think there is more of a moving away from factions with sub-factions abilities allowed them to then craft like more bespoke, like the detachment concept I think is actually better than what we had before. Like, I think of Tau in 9th edition, where I think they had 20 stratagems. So just like how those all interacted together with the like sub-faction rules was kind of a mess. The detachment allows them to create these bespoke, like, this is the thing that does X. And I think that's actually like the best that they've come up with for a while, that's allowed them to be like, here's how you take your range of models and play them differently. And is it perfect? No, but it does seem to be like a tool that allows you to like creatively use your list.
Yeah, I think they're doing a good job. Like, I think Gene Stealer Cult kind of missed the mark a little bit, but they're like fixing it, because I think that the army role just got updated, so that's like moving in the right direction. But generally, I mean, it is in the most balanced state it's ever been, so that's saying something, you know.
I mean, I think they did a good job of like identifying the fluffy archetypes of sisters. There's some weird stuff in like the Penitent one doesn't work with Repentia for some reason. So like there's a few.
Yeah.
They didn't get it perfect. But the like, you know, Penance view the like Sisters of Faith, and then what's the other one? There's a third one. It's not coming to me. Yeah, just like flame you to death nonsense, which is salamanders again, but is also very sisters.
I think the Tau is probably one of the best codexes they've come out with so far. I'm going to be very honest. Yeah, I really do. I think detachments in that are like dead on. I don't think they could have done a better job. Like, those feel like perfect. If they could do all of the rest of them that well, that would be great.
I do feel like the Salamanders suffered from being the first version of the Salamanders one, because like Renegade Raiders in CSM is also Salamanders, but probably a better structured version of it that Salamanders would probably rather have. No, but I think going back to the point of like the LARPing side of it, of like just being able to have fun playing the game and like have fun with like the hobby as a whole, I think is a huge part of like how you make sure you're always enjoying what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's why we're here. We're here to have fun with it. If you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. You know, and you should be asking yourself why you're not having fun and looking to correct that thing. If that is like, hey, listen, I'm not having fun playing, I need to back off from playing, or I need to play differently. You know, because for a while I was like, after I came back from that first tournament, I was like, I'm a competitive player.
Yeah.
I need to play competitively. And then all of the competitive players I played made me really not have fun playing the game. I was like, you know what? Maybe competitive play is not for me. Man, I'm just going to look into doing more narrative, and that's where I'm having fun. I'm running a crusade, and I have a blast doing it, and that's where I'm having fun. So I had to look at that, and I had to set that boundary for myself. I had to go, okay, you know what? I'm okay like helping other competitive players practice, but like we need to know that that's what we're showing up to. That's what we're doing. And otherwise, like I have fun in other ways, you know? So that's important.
I mean, I think I said this to you when we played on TTS. I play competitively. I'm not a competitive player.
Yep.
And part of that, and if you're ever wondering like what does this LARPing thing look like, just watch what like an orc player does. Every time you play into orcs, you're like, it makes sense you play orcs. You can like see them coming. You're like, that person plays orcs. And then you can go ask them and be like, hey, do you play orcs? And they'll be like, yeah, it's one of the armies I play. And you're like, yep, makes sense.
They're just special kinds of people, and they're all great.
Absolutely.
It's funny too, because the people who are not, when you hear the orc players go off in a room, and everybody else rolls their eyes collectively.
Yeah.
Father,
Like there was a time that I was like, orcs seem cool, but I'm not an orc player. It's not in my heart. It's not in my soul. No, thank you so much for coming on. It's been great to have you back, and like I said, I think this is a topic that we can never talk too little about. Well, on that note, I want to thank you all for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe to Chaos Divided wherever you're listening from, and you can find us on Instagram and YouTube at Chaos Divided 40K. If you're a fan of what we're doing, you want to join our growing Wholesome Hammer community, you can find us on patreon.com/Chaos Divided 40K. Help support the show, connect with us, good stuff. And if you'd like to find us directly, you're at Ulfgar the Awful on Instagram. I am at Blushing Noise Marine. Send some love to at Nurgle_Snurgle. And until next time, bye-bye.